So let's talk about the people that, we're discussing, the impact that you had. Let's talk about the individual stories. Jeff, do you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. One of the people I knew and worked with quite a bit was Jared Van Alist. He was my platoon sergeant for 2 years, both in sniper section and then in 1st Platoon ACO 375, 3rd Ranger Battalion, around 2004, 2005, into 2006. And I have a picture of Jared here. I'll hold up for you. I called him Sergeant, but most people knew him as VA by his last initials. And Sergeant Van Alist, he served as the sniper platoon sergeant. When I met him, I had to go in front of a board and get selected for the platoon. And Sergeant Van Alist, let me come and work with him. And he really did have a huge influence on not just me, but the entire Ranger community, and is something of a legend in the 75th Ranger Regiment.
So, as a person, how what was he like as a leader? Obviously, somebody you trusted, but as a person, was he serious? Was he?
Sergeant Van Alist took his job very seriously, and I even recall a conversation I had with him once in Iraq, where we actually got together on 9/11, on the anniversary of 9/11 in 2005, and we talked a little bit about what the war meant to us, what it was, and VA was very patriotic, and I also remember him telling us how this was personal to him. He felt he was doing this for his family as well. This was to protect our families back home from terrorism, and as a combat leader, I attribute a lot to him, a lot of credit to him for bringing his platoon home alive. Some came back wounded, but everyone made it back from an exceedingly dangerous combat deployment where we were getting into contacts with the enemy every day. And I'll hold up a picture of...
That was Afghanistan?
This was Iraq. This was Mosul in 2005. And there's a picture of VA on the right-hand side and our platoon leader on the left-hand side. And surviving combat and being successful in combat, it has a lot to do with luck, as much as we don't want to really acknowledge that, but it does. But it also has a lot to do with skill and leadership. And those two guys, Sergeant Van Alist in particular, had a lot to do with getting us through that deployment and getting all of his Rangers back home. So, as a leader, VA was a perfectionist. And yeah, it's true that could make him hard to work with sometimes, because he expected a lot from you. He expected you to be on point, just like he was. He did lead by example, so it wasn't hypocritical at all. He was, I think you could legitimately say, he was one of the best shooters in the Army, one of the best shots. He had the credentials to back that up. He served in the Army Marksmanship Unit, as well as serving as the actual sniper in Ranger Battalion.
Those guys, just so people know, most of those guys that serve on the AMU are going to the Olympics to shoot for gold. I mean, these guys are the top marksmen in the country.
Yeah, and Van Alist was definitely one of the top marksmen in the U.S. military. And that was something he brought to the table. And I think the kind of perfection and the kind of focus that you have to put into every shot you take is something that Van Alist really brought to the table as a leader, and really paid attention to details and the little things that it takes to get through a mission and to make sure that you're successful, and the little analytical abilities of looking over every little thing on the vehicles and the equipment and how different forces are going to be employed on the ground. And that was something that I credit to him, and it was something that made me think about how I wanted to run things as I was a team leader in my own leadership position, and later on when I was in Special Forces. So he did have a big impact on me, and I think on the entire platoon.
Did you find that his leadership, because it's obviously had a profound impact on you, the first time you went into combat, did you look for him as guidance, or was it because of his leadership you never questioned, you just kind of did?
Guidance was the sort of thing you would get from him more before or after. That kind of like mentorship, one-on-one, even sometimes just sitting down, he could be your friend and you could talk about guns and all day, of course, and what's the right way to go about things. In combat, it ran like a well-oiled machine between our PL and Van Alist, the platoon sergeant. So there wasn't any need really to look to him for guidance because everything had been done beforehand. You'd set the conditions for success before you even went outside the wire. And like I said, the fact that we all came home alive is amazing.
Mark of a good leader.
Yeah, it really is.
Is there any story in particular that stands out?
There's a lot of stories that stand out. I think some of the
some that you can tell.
Some of the better ones are the funnier ones. That you remember, in your mind as you recall these things. Like I remember one time when I was the new guy in the platoon, and Sergeant Van Alist came to me and he said, "Listen, Murphy, you're going to be the designated driver tonight." And I was like, "Oh,
we've all done that."
What are we getting into? I was a corporal at the time. No, I was a specialist at the time in sniper section. And he said, "Yeah, you're going to drive the truck. You're taking all the guys downtown Columbus, Georgia." So we went out, and we ended up at Scruffy Murphy's, and then the other guys went across the street to a club. And I had lost track of them for just maybe a couple minutes. And then I came out of Scruffy Murphy's, and I was walking across the street to meet them. And then I see Van Alist and the rest of the platoon. Probably it's like 6, 7 other guys from the sniper section walking towards me, like walking fast, in a hurry. And Van Alist looks at me, "Murphy, we're leaving. Get in the car. Get in the car. We're leaving. We're leaving right now." I'm like, "What's going on?" The guy comes chasing after these guys, comes out of the club chasing them with a pair of hedge clippers. And it turned out one of the other guys in the platoon had pushed this guy into the water fountain in the big median area, in the downtown area. So we all piled into the SUV, and I peeled out. Someone threw a 40-ounce bottle of malt liquor against the side of the truck that shattered. So I'm hauling it down the road. We go flying over one of those big speed bumps they have down there, and VA's sitting there in the passenger seat next to me. "Murphy, you don't know how to drive. What are you doing?" So it's some of those stories that stand out in your mind, and it's just a lot of fond memories of VA and all of the just little particularities that he had and the things that he was interested in. Like you can see in this picture how he has this Filipino fighting knife. It's called a carabit, tucked down into his body armor. And Van Alist was someone who actually learned how to make knives, like make them from scratch. And that was another one of his hobbies. It seemed like all things, weapons and gear. He just strove to take it to a higher level than, the average ranger even would have.
So where were you when you found out he was killed?
I was out of the Army, actually. It was 2010. I had just left the military. And in the time that I had left and gone to Special Forces and then ETS'd out of the Army, Sergeant Van Alist had continued to serve, continued deploying overseas with Ranger Battalion. And then his career ambition was to go to Delta Force and become a Delta operator, which really I don't think surprises anyone. That was his personality and his professional goal. Of course, he wanted to be the best of the best in the special operations community. So he went and became a Delta operator, and I found out about his death from another buddy from 1st Platoon, from ACO 375. We called ourselves the Glory Boys. We're not supposed to call ourselves that, but that's what we called ourselves anyway. And he had gotten in touch with me and said, "Hey, did you hear about VA?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." And that's when I found out about it. And Sergeant Van Alist was killed in November of 2010 while conducting combat operations in Afghanistan. And I think the whole community felt that loss. He was a mentor, a professional. He was our platoon sergeant. He's somebody that a lot of guys looked up to, and certainly it hit all of us pretty hard.
Or he was somebody that was such a leader for you guys. It must have been sort of surreal to realize that he was that vulnerable, that could happen to him.
Yeah, I mean, your platoon sergeant is always somebody who's larger than life. Everybody looks up to him. As a new guy in the platoon, you don't even look at your platoon sergeant, never mind talking to him. This guy is like, there's a light shining behind his head and everything. When you're a brand new corporal or a brand new private coming into the unit. In VA, I remember having some conversations also with him about leadership and talking to him about some of the leaders that he served under growing up in Ranger Battalion, and saying how people couldn't even believe anything bad about them because they admired this guy so much. I think he was talking about his platoon sergeant when he was a specialist. And, I think that's kind of how we looked at it too. We came to see him as, somebody who is, larger than life.
So is there somebody else that also had the similar impact that VA did?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Within our platoon, within 1st Platoon, the Glory Boys, we, unfortunately, we got hit with hand grenades dropped down on us from an overpass, and I believe that was in early October of 2005 in Mosul. And our PL was hurt, and one of our squad leaders was probably the worst injured. One of the hand grenades actually landed inside the vehicle and went off.
Were you there?
Yes, I was there. I was in the lead vehicle, actually sitting on top of it at the time when the hand grenades came down on us. And I thought initially we'd been hit with RPGs from the 6 o'clock position, but no, it was actually hand grenades that were dropped down on us. And I remember hearing the screams. You could smell the sulfur in the air, and there's just that cloud of smoke around you. And then you start hearing the guys screaming. And one of them was Joseph Kapicheski, who was a staff sergeant at the time. He was one of our squad leaders, and we rushed these guys back to the base, back to the FOB, to get medical attention. And Van Alist, our platoon sergeant, was very concerned with these guys, and I remember him sitting there with Kapicheski and with our PL at the time. And he cared deeply for the guys under his command. He cared for them not just as soldiers, but also as friends on a personal level. And Kapicheski got medevaced, back to the United States eventually. And it was a long, hard road for him. But I have a picture here for you that I didn't hold up. And this was the end result. They ended up having to amputate one of his legs, and he came back to work. I believe he was the only Ranger to amputee to come back to work. He had to go through the selection process, and I remember being with him and Walter Reed when he had an external fixator around his leg as he was trying to heal up, and then coming out when my platoon was getting ready for the next deployment, and we were out at the shoot house, and Kapicheski came back to Fort Benning, and he kind of comes out on crutches, and he's talking to us, almost apologizing. He's like, "Guys, I'm not going to be able to come on the next deployment with you." And it's like, oh my God. He's like, "But don't worry, I'll be on the one after that. I'll be there." And so there's never any doubt in my mind that he'd be coming back to work, but even I'm just shocked by it, by the extent of it. And he's gone on to be completely successful as a Ranger. He has a family now. I mean, it's really an amazing story about how he jumped all the way back, almost to being a fully functional soldier. It's unreal.
Was VA able to see his recovery? Was he still around when he came back?
Yeah, a large part of it, yeah. I think most of it, in fact. So I'm sure he felt good about that. And Sergeant Van Alist made very clear to Kapicheski from the get-go. He said, "There's a place for you in this platoon, and we'll be waiting for you." And that's exactly what happened. So
I think it comes back to the whole perspective thing that we were talking about earlier. I had my friend Turbo lost his leg on Roberts Ridge. Took a round through the calf and ended up amputating his leg. And 10 months since his leg was removed, he was back with Dev Group or SEAL Team 6 in Afghanistan, operating again. Guys like Adam Brown, who was recently, Eric Blem featured him in that book, Fearless. Adam, missing an eye, most his right hand, tried out for Dev Group, passed selection. The list goes on. I have another friend, lost his hand in an explosion. And these guys are still active and operating overseas. And, when I'm sitting on an airplane hearing people complain because they've lost 30, 40 minutes of their lives, I'm like, this is just nothing compared to what's going on in the real world.
Just to make a mention, because unfortunately we don't have a pilot here, but 160th pilots coming back to work also with amputated limbs.